Hi, I'm Annalisa.
I'm Maggie.
And I'm Nicole.
And this is Unconditional, the podcast. Today, we're going to talk about tackling self-doubt, which is actually day 6 in the book, Unconditional, Learning to Love Your Authentic Self. So we're jumping around a little bit, and that's okay. But for tackling self-doubt, we could approach it from a dozen. We could approach it from hundreds of different perspectives, right? You can tackle self-doubt. Every individual and every therapist is going to do this in a unique way. So I picked 4 that worked for me and tend to work for people I know. That's challenging your negative thoughts. It's a CBT technique. Small victories. This comes from animal assisted therapy, but really it's about giving yourself an easy win. The apple core technique, if you want to invite someone to throw an apple core at you. No, this is a way of forcing yourself to sit down and name all of your good points. And the supportive character, which is drawn from narrative therapy.
Tell us a bit about the apple core. I'm just like getting this like vision of Lisa just like chucking apple cores at somebody. And I feel like, I mean, maybe, like we said, there's hundreds of ways to go about figuring out self-doubt. And maybe there's something to do with an apple core, who knows? But for all of those awesome people listening, what is going on with the apple cores?
Okay, the backstory. I am the youngest of 4 children by a lot of years. And when we were young, we used to play this game where one person would be eating an apple, and when they finished it, they would have this gross, mostly eaten apple core in their hand. And they would shout out to whoever was in listening distance, apple core, and somebody else would respond, Baltimore. And then the first person would say, who's your friend? And then they would pick a random person, point at them and say, she is. And that person would get an apple core lobbed at their head. So somehow this turned into, if you were doing something repeatedly silly, like not dodging the apple core, apple core is just code for like, hey, you need to like kind of look after yourself. Like maybe when someone's screaming apple core in Baltimore, you should hide. Or, maybe after the 17th time of doing this, what your brother and sister are about to do to you. So the way that I have turned this into a playful approach to tackling self-doubt is that I invite my reader to bring a friend and give the friend an apple core and a timer. So they have to set the timer for 5 minutes, and you have to sit there and write every good thing you can think of about yourself, every strength, every skill, every positive trait. And if you falter, they get to throw the apple core at you. And if you say, I'm good at this, but they get to throw the apple core at you. Right? If you stop and say, I give up, they get to throw the apple core at you. So then I add a little caveat at the end that says, if you don't really want to be lobbed with apple cores, that's okay. The point is, I do want you to sit down with a timer and a good friend who's going to help you really get through this list, because there's so much more to love about you than you realize. And sometimes you just need someone to give you a little push.
I don't know about everyone listening, but at least for me personally, if you can relate, I would be apple cored to death, probably. That it sounds, when reading that portion, it sounds like such a difficult thing to do. Like, I mean, for me, definitely, I would be the loser in that game for sure.
Nicole, she just called herself a loser, which means we get to throw an apple core.
I was about to say, if we were in the same room right now, I'd be throwing apple cores at you, Maggie. But also, I feel like a lot of us would, like, that's like the fire lit under your butt situation of like, okay, I got to think long and hard about this, but quickly, right? Like, building the agility of like thinking about the good things about about myself.
Let me just take this minute to say that Nicole writes all her own jokes and none of them are rehearsed, and she comes up with them on the spot. So yeah. But it's like the modesty aspect of it, you know. It's like our natural response to be complimented, to feel complimented. We're so used to complimenting others, where when we need to spend a lot more time complimenting ourselves, because if like you said, if you fall out of practice with that, it becomes really difficult to do. Take it from me, when Lisa said writing a dating profile, that is such a struggle for me. I'm like, hi, this is my name, and I like true crime, and I have dogs, and like, you know, come on, man, dig deep. You are a wonderful human, and people need to know what you love most about yourself, because at the end of the day, that's the most important, right? What you think about yourself, not what anybody else thinks.
That's why so first off, I'm funny. Okay. So just to put that out there, if I was writing the list and Lisa and Maggie were lobbing apple cores at me, that's one of the things I'm writing down. I was also thinking about just like the idea of one thing that I do with other clients, right? So when helping with self-doubt, but also like if someone's struggling with self-esteem or confidence, of talking to your best friend, talk to yourself like you're your best friend, right? So you know, every so often I work with adolescents and adults, right? So with adolescents, I'll be like, would you say that to your best friend? Or stop talking to your best friend like that. And it gives them a moment of like, oh, okay, wait a second, what did I just say? I just said something bad about myself, and just kind of like give a pause to reframe and get into some different like verbiage about like what they're saying, right? Not to say that we have to be like overly positive, right? It's not like, oh man, I suck at this, and then we have to go to, oh, I'm the best thing ever, which like you are, listener. But like also, if you're struggling with something, right? Like maybe you feel like you're not that great at math, or you feel like you're struggling with a particular hobby, or you know, a sport or whatever. Maybe it's, I just need more practice, right? I need to give myself more grace to get better at this. Instead of like totally being down on yourself. So it builds that confidence to be able to work on that. But yeah, it's kind of like what we were talking about with like the apple core, right? Of just like thinking, would I say this to one of my loved ones? And if I wouldn't, I probably shouldn't be saying it to myself.
It's an amazing correlation to what a love list is, which is what Lisa talks about in one of her chapters, which I'll let her go into the story about it. But moral of the story, before we even get into it, is you should be at the top of your love list. If you know, when you're creating a love list, essentially you're cultivating gratitude and listing the things that you're thankful for, that you love, and that you can't live without. You should be number one at the top all the time. It's like taking care of your own sim avatar. You need to put your oxygen mask on first.
Make sure you give them food and water and a door to walk out of, right? In the sim world, that is very important. You got to take care of the basics, guys.
Do not build them into a small room and let them die. That is not the thing to do.
So the love list. So this happened because River learned how to write and learned how to read and write, and got herself a cute little fuzzy pink diary that had the little like lock on it. You remember the little like heart lock that you have a tiny key? Right. So she got her first journal, and she came and asked me. So she was in like kindergarten, right? And she came and asked me how to spell, I don't know, somebody's name. Let's say Jack. How do you spell Jack's name? So I tell her, and she's like, okay, how do you spell Leah's name? She writes Leah. How do you spell, you know, this and that? So she goes through all of the people in our neighborhood, all of the kids in her class, everyone in our family. She's asking me how to spell everybody's name. I'm like, what is going on right now? So we get to the end of the list and she's like, it's my love list, right? She has love list written across the top in big bold letters. She wrote her little love list at the beginning of her diary. And I was like, well, honey, you're missing somebody on your love list. And she's like, no, Benji's on there, our dog. And I'm like, no, you're missing someone else. She's like, well, who? Just tell me. Like you got to add yourself to your love list right at the top. Go and squeeze your name at the very top. And she did. And it was like this super sweet moment. And I was like, it's not just for 5-year-olds, right? It's for all of us. Like we all have our list of people that we care deeply about, that we're going to help them with their problems. We're going to give them compliments. We're going to boost them up when they're doubting themselves. And that's awesome because we're good, compassionate, loving people. And also we got to add ourselves to the list and do all of those same things for ourselves. I love the idea of looking at the love list every time you open up your journal to write about what's bothering you, right? To be reminded that, hey, there's these people I love who love me. And whatever it is I'm going through, right? I've got support. I think that's awesome. Nicole, you should, write your own book about clever techniques for therapy and counseling.
And the sight of that list may ease your mind and your emotions that you may just forget about what you came to journal about in the first place. It might all just fleet away because of those support systems that you have in your life. You just come to that moment and say, I'm grateful for these people.
The first page of all of my journals, I like map out my values. And they've changed over the years. So when I open up my book, I see, the word joy in the center. And then around that is mindfulness, playfulness, gratitude, the things that matter to me. And then outside of that, animals and nature and family. And that like gives me that like really good feeling. And it also helps to hold me accountable. So when I open up the journal, I'm like, all right, am I actually doing the things that matter to me? Or am I overworking or putting my attention into something that doesn't actually matter? But I might try the love list for my next journal. I think I might mix it up. Okay, so the supportive character. This is a narrative therapy technique developed by Jingwen Liu. He's a professional counselor. He was trained at Lehigh, but he lives and works in China now. So he was talking about this client who was really struggling to identify someone, essentially someone that would be on her love list, right? She didn't really have a lot of supportive people in her life. And they were working on figuring out like who could embody the supportive, loving person that you need to like guide you right now, to give you the care and support that you need. And she had read Harry Potter, of course, and loved it, and really loved Dumbledore and thought of Dumbledore as a father figure. And Jingwen, as well-read as he is, and as much as he does really enjoy like fantasy in this genre, he actually hadn't read Harry Potter at that time. And he was like, who is this Dumbledore? But he went with it, because he's a great counselor. And they started doing this consistently whenever she needed support, needed the best friend. It's a lot like the best friend technique, right? Like, would you talk to your best friend this way? Or what would your best friend say to you? In this case, it was, what would Dumbledore say to you? And that just like, that touched the geek in me that loves Harry Potter, and that also touched the narrative therapist in me, who's like, yes, this is incredible. So I got his permission to write about it in this chapter, and I do a variation of that with lots of people.
WWDD, what would Dumbledore do? What a great character to zero in on.
Now that we're on the topic, what would be from Harry Potter, right? We're going to narrow this down. What would be your character from Harry Potter that you would make, that would make this list? I'll go first. So I have two. One would be Professor Lupin. I think that with everything that he was just very wise, and everything that he went through and being misunderstood and having a lot like within like the trials and tribulations that he went through. But he was also somebody who was very much for others, and being there. I just think of the moment when the Dementors are going after Harry on when they're on their way to Hogwarts, and he like comes out of nowhere and he's like, here's some chocolate, let me tell you about some stuff, right? Like he was obviously, he didn't say it like that, but like I digress. So Lupin is definitely one. But McGonagall, the badass herself, is definitely on that list because man, she knew herself. She was very secure, and she had a way of just like laying the law, but also being like, you know, comforting and very like kind and considerate when she needed to. So that woman, oh, those two would be like my supports.
Great choices, Nicole. Wonderful choices. I also have two, but one could be considered one, I think, because they're a package deal. So Hagrid is my number one. He's just the big old teddy bear, and they can always rely on Hagrid, no matter what they need. If they need, you know, remedy for puking slugs, or, you know, what have you, going into the Forbidden Forest with all those spiders, no thanks. But yeah, he's wonderful, and you know, just makes me cry like every single time he sees them off to, you know, when they go home and when they come into the station when they're arriving for school. I'm always just like, oh my god, I love you, Hagrid. And then the other two are Fred and George, because the humor, I just love those two. um Especially, they just always have the like the wit that they just sneak in there, you know, perfect one liners. And you know, they go on to have like the joke shop, which is perfect. uh and they're tall, comforting figures as well. When they show up with the map for Harry, they're all, you know, they're like Harry's big brothers that he never had. So um I think that's why, because my brother and I are very close, so that probably makes sense.
Okay, I will add two more people to our Harry Potter love list. Molly Weasley, who is the mom I aspire to be and want in my life. I mean, I love my mom too, but Molly Weasley, oh my gosh.
Was she like the first character to use a swear word? I'm pretty sure she was. We all know the moment too, right?
I would also add Hedwig to the list because you cannot replace the unconditional love of, you know, a beloved pet, right? So Hedwig.
I was gonna say Hedwig, but I couldn't think of his name in the moment. It just kept coming to my brain as Cedric or Diggory, and I knew that wasn't one of them. Yeah.
Beautiful people. I mean, see, if anyone listening to this has not read Harry Potter, clearly this is your sign to go and do so.
Self-care tip of the week: go read Harry Potter, all the way through, in conjunction 1 through 7.
And we are going to just add right now that we stand by our trans listeners, our trans community. Trans women are women, trans men are men, and we do not agree with the beliefs and values of the author, but we do agree with the amazing actors and actresses who stood up and, you know, said their piece about the situation that we all know what I'm referring to, right?
So I think, getting down to the nitty-gritty of this episode, that our listeners should create their own love list. And if you struggle to create a love list because you don't exactly have the support system, you know, that you would like or need to have, pick your favorite characters from your favorite movie, and rate them on your love list, or pick a character from all of your favorite movies, or pick characters from your favorite shows. It doesn't have to be, real people in your life. It can be fictional, it can be, creative, like we're doing now.
It can be people you admire. Oprah's on my love list. Okay, so that's a wrap for today. Thank you so much for listening. Tune in next week. We'll talk about the healing power of nature and animals.